All right, guys. Copper Cutlass here. It's a beautiful Friday night. Wife's hanging outside. I am just coming out here. It's like 10 o'clock. I did some work in the basement to make the an engine crane for the basement. Tomorrow I build the ramps. The game plan is to get the engine in the garage tomorrow, and then tomorrow night install the engine. I got a couple of things to button up on the engine once it's off the stand. I got the split plug to put in it for the distributor, the pipe fitting at the back, the core plugs at the back, and then the water pump, and then we can install it. But the game plan is it's supposed to be really hot tomorrow, like during the day, and I like to work in comfort. So the idea is to put the engine in tomorrow night, button up the bell housing, converter, frame mounts, and then Sunday's supposed to be nice, so then we'll dress it all up Sunday. But the reason I wanted to talk is because I'm on a mission now to piss people off. Some of you guys who may know me from the forum, specifically Classic Oldsmobiles, if you've known me long enough, you can always go back and see how many times people told me that I was wrong, or shit was going to blow up, or something was going to go wrong. And like hindsight, I really haven't had that much failure. I think one I can think of was probably right before I bought my house. So 2012, I had a 350 in here that was running low 13s with the capability of high 12s, but I was undercarbed, too tight of a converter. And then when I turned the wick up, I knocked out 4 skirts because I was running cast flat tops with 6,000s piston wall clearance, which is great for racing, not good for longevity. And then the following engine that I built for it after that one, we drove it for a season, and it turns out the camshaft was actually bent and it was wiping out the bearings. And that was not my fault. I learned that in the manufacturing process of the camshaft, it is actually bent multiple times, and it has to go through a final straightening and hardening process. And it probably wasn't hardened the last time, and it actually bent in the block because it went in. It did not want to come out. It took a 10-pound slide hammer, my body slugger, to get the camshaft out. And we put new cam bearings in it and the cam, and that was probably the most fun engine I had in the car. We were running low 12s with that engine. Low 12s at about 109, I want to say, and we were driving it to the track and back, and it was a lot of fun. That was probably the most fun engine combination I had in this car, and it was bread and butter, basic low 12s. The car was all steel. It only had a 2800 stall converter. It was very happy. It was super streetable. And then the engine that was in here last year that we're freshened up, that we're going to put back in, that engine was quite the trooper. Nothing really went wrong with that. That's been a good engine. I spent a lot of money on the machine work. I used a very, very expensive machine shop for that. But I also, I assembled it. I put it together. There was enough room for error there too, where I could have really screwed it up. But you know what? We ran the crap out of that engine, and it ran 1140s, and it was happy. And then obviously this one, you guys know the situation. I don't think it was bad work. It was just the luck of the draw on the parts. And, nobody really told me that for the RPM I was turning, I should probably be running floating pins on bushed ends with spiral locks. You kind of learn the hard way. Well, that's kind of how we do things around here. But again, I think I am going to save this engine because I think this engine is still very capable of running. I think that engine's capable of 1130s, to be honest with you. It ran really good. Really, really good, to be honest with you. It ran an 1158 on a junk tune, barely running. Maybe it was a wrist pin issue at that time. We just didn't know it. Who knows? But the point being is that this engine, first time out, ran 1158, and it still managed an 1172, and then an 1195 last time through the mufflers. So the mufflers instantly is if I take them off, it's 2/10 off. I've proven that time and time and time again. If I run open headers versus exhaust, it's 2/10, period. So I guess the main purpose of today was for me to kind of touch on the subject of know your history, gents. Let me take a swig here. I got to use both hands for this one. So, let's talk about purists, muscle cars, and how it all started, right? 3 subjects, actually. So, you want to keep your Oldsmobile all Oldsmobile, and that's what I keep hearing because, like, oh, bleh, bleh, bleh. Okay, so let's go back to how hot rodding actually started. Guys putting flathead V8s in their Model A's, whatever. Yeah, Ford was Ford, but there wasn't many V8 options at the time. And then came your more modern V8s, which I think the second wave of that would have been the Cadillac, the Oldsmobile. I want to say the 303, and the Cadillac had like a 371, I want to say, or something like that. It's been a while since I did any reading on that stuff, to be honest with you. But then very quickly comes in the small block Chevy. And at that time also the 392 Hemi came out. So you had 2 very capable engines by like the mid to late 50s. People were putting those engines now into their Model Ts and Model As and stuff like that. But what really killed the flathead was the small block Chevy. And that's literally like everybody went to the small block Chevy when it came out. It was compact, it was light, it was versatile, had a lot of capability. And at the time, it was cutting edge, like the LS. So putting an LS into my Oldsmobile is actually keeping the tradition of hot rodding and racing alive, because that is where drag racing started, right? That is where it all started. And I've seen guys even do more unique swaps. You know, like I've seen people put 2 JZ Toyota engines in Camaros and Mustangs, and I think that stuff is cool. But I think, again, GM nailed it with the LS as far as like either they planned it ahead of time because they're smart or whatever. But prior to the LS, the only engine I can think of that saw like a good wave there was the 4.6 modular engine, I want to say, from Ford. I may be wrong there on that one, but I remember that 4.6 being a pretty hot engine if you had a Mustang back in the day, and guys were putting it in Fox bodies. But like once the LS came out, like everybody forgot about the 4.6, and like even with the Coyote engine out, like you don't see as many Coyote swaps as you do LS swaps. And I actually really like the Coyote engine. I love the fact that the NMCA has that Coyote stock class where you can just take any chassis, any platform, but you have to have a sealed like Coyote motor in it. I love that. That's actually a really cool class to watch. Very competitive. Down here in Route 66 in Joliet, when they had the NMCA, NMRA Super Bowl drag racing, I loved watching that class because it was very, very competitive. And guys would put in Coyote engines and stuff you wouldn't believe. Like really unique stuff. There was a lot of Fox bodies, but the class pretty much at that time was like 3 different brackets. You were either like 1030s or 1080s or like low 10s. And that was kind of it. That class has evolved a lot more because the last time I went to that specific race was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. But again, just to kind of like piss people off, like, you know, the whole concept of the muscle car was built around the fact that guys were swapping bigger engines into smaller cars. They took a larger engine into a mid-sized car. That was the GTO. According to historians, the first true muscle car that was marketed as kind of such. Obviously, V8s and mid-sized cars were nothing new. You had the Oldsmobile Rocket 88 prior to that. It's very debatable, but the first marketed vehicle that took advantage of that market was the GTO. And then it followed from there. But obviously, you had your max wedge cars prior to that, your Savoys and your, I forgot what other fucking Mopar it was. But the 63s, 64s, 62s, stuff like that. They had the 413s, I think, in it. That was a really cool engine. But again, those are kind of like factory swapped cars. I mean, they were done for a purpose, and it was not the engine that belonged in that car, but they made it that way. And it's kind of what we're doing here. We're keeping the tradition of hot rodding alive, and I've always kind of done it on the budget end. And nothing here is expensive. Nothing here is a big money. We use a lot of repurposed stuff. People might think that just because you use junk engines, you build a junk motor, but no, like I saved that engine that started out as 7 spun rod bearings. This thing still has great oil pressure. It's got no oiling problems, no rod bearing issues, but clearly, you know, we had a wrist pin issue. This is not at all what we expected, but hey, shit happens, right? That's hot rodding. That's what happens. You break shit sometimes. And like, I really can't say that I've spent a lot of money on it over the years. It's always been trickled out, and that's what's kept me going. But my whole reason for going LS is I'm at a point in my life where it just makes sense to just go to something more practical, viable, and for the ease of things, just I'm kind of like over building Oldsmobile engines. I've done it long enough, and I've done Ford engines, and if I could start all over right now, I'd probably go out and buy like a Fox body Mustang and build like a 351. Like, I am impressed with my buddy Tim's car, who's got a junkyard 351 Windsor bottom end with some, I think he's got Flowtech heads on it or something. That car rips like a 12.0 at 116. It's a stick car, and once he gets that thing going, that thing's going to run like low 11s. You know, once he gets everything dialed in, that's a low 11 second car on a stock bottom 351 Windsor. That's with an E303 cam. So for you Ford guys, you know that camshaft. There's a very impressive combination. I actually want to cover his car, but either way, I call it the Dollar General special, and he takes offense to that. But what I mean by that is that car, dollar for dollar, is putting in some serious fucking work. But that's what hot rodding to me is keeping it low buck, keeping it fun, and going with your best possible choice. And from here, if I was to continue with Oldsmobile and want to go faster, I would have to spend severely a lot more money. And I think I mentioned that if I wanted to build a stroker with a good crank, a good rod, a good piston, the short block alone would probably run me like $6,000. That's without machine work. And it's just not worth it. I could build a stock bottom end 6.0 with some good heads, a cam, single plane carbureted intake, do the dressing, and I kind of already priced it out. I'd be in it for under $7,000, and it would have some longevity and easier serviceability through like network of parts and stuff like that. So it just makes a lot of sense to me at this point in my life to do that. And you guys might be saying, like, why are you beating a dead horse? Well, there's a lot of people to piss off out there. So the more that I post it, the more that it's going to piss them off. Like, the Buick Olds Pontiac guys are like the worst group of fucking blowhards in the world. And I don't mean to insult people like that personally, but let me tell you, coming up in the hobby, in the Oldsmobile world, these people wonder why newer generations don't appreciate these cars. It's not the cars, it's the people that drive them away. With your I'm older, I'm better, I'm right mentality. And I lived it because I came up in the trade, and you know, right now there's a lack of tradesmen. You want to know why? Because of that same mentality. It's not that kids don't want to work. These old dudes don't know how to work with younger people and accept the fact that everybody learns differently. So coming up in the trade, personally, I had to develop my own ways with whatever little bits I can gather because, yeah, I had a hard time working with people because I don't process information like that person or another person. So my skill set is just a combination of everything I've learned over the years from different people combined into what I can compile of it. And yeah, so people want to say that there's a lack of tradespeople in this country. A big part of it too is that hard-headed mentality, kind of like being the anti-LS swap crowd. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's hot right now because guess who's doing it? All the younger people that want to go fast and not spend a lot of money, and they want to have the viability of fucking parts. They don't care if it's in an Oldsmobile or a Ford or whatever. They just want to stick something in there and go. But the purists want to say, oh, this, that, and the other. And some people, like, it's a big, they want to be a part of a community, but they don't want to get beat up for it. So, like, what are you going to do? Like, that same mentality kills the hobby. It doesn't bring in any fresh blood. But that's how the hobby started. So what are you going to do? So that's my heart to heart on this whole scenario. If you stuck around long enough, thank you. Hit the like button. Share, like, subscribe. We're like 5 subscribers away from 1,000, which is huge for me because I've never been out to get a lot of subscribers. I've just done this for fun. But lately, there's been a turn in tides. I've been getting a lot of support lately on the whole LS swap thing. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep my Oldsmobile engines. I'm not going to get rid of them. As far as my good engines, I'm not going to get rid of them if I don't need to. I'm going to keep them. We're going to plan for an LS swap. It's not going to happen right away, but in the fall and the winter, we're going to gather our nuts, gather our hibernation equipment, and just slowly start putting something together. So it's not going to happen right away, but it's going to happen because at this point, I got something to prove, and we're going to do it cheap, and we're going to do it good, and we're going to learn. So thanks, guys.